Everybody. For those of you who are new to our community that haven't met, you're most welcome here, and we genuinely mean it. My name again is Brian, and I get to be the Justice Pastor here. It is incredible to be a part of this church. I love the fact that Gayleen gave her story today because of what we're going to be talking about, and we didn't plan these two things to go together, but they just do really, really well. This idea of having a difficult situation, but then also being able to somehow be okay, like what Chad was talking about. And so we're going to talk about this concept of a vineyard and of a vine. And so Jesus is going to give this metaphor that's going to kind of weave its way through several different aspects of what it means to be connected to him, what it means to follow him with those who were closest to him. And then the implications that come out of that. When you're connected with me, there's some stuff that's going to happen. When you're connected with me, there are some ways that you're going to respond to situations that are just radically different. And so I want to start with a bit of my story that just happened a few minutes ago. Just to kind of pull back the curtain of sometimes what it's like to be up here is sometimes I get finished with the sermon and I don't feel like I did a good job. And sometimes maybe I don't, and you'd be like, yeah, there were plenty of times that you should feel that way. And what I'm not saying is please come up to me afterward. Please don't do that. But there's some times where I just feel like, right? And today, in first service, ended up being one of those days, and I was trying to explain it during our debrief, and I was just saying, I feel disconnected emotionally from everything that I said. And it wasn't necessarily that anything that I said that I was frustrated with or mad about, but it felt more like I was giving a term paper than I was like caught up in it. And what's weird is right before I got up here to preach, I felt so connected to it. I felt so emotionally invested. And then when I got up here, I'm hearing myself talk in ways that I can't actually connect with the stuff. Does any of this make sense? So I decided to go on a prayer walk. And so I took a loop all the way around the big building, like all the way around. While you guys were in worship, I was worshiping differently. And what I was planning to do was I was planning to pray and just go, God, fix it. God, take it off or help me put it on or just whatever any of that stuff might mean, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it. But as soon as I started praying, and I pray out loud when I prayer walk because it just helps me keep me focused, because otherwise I'm like, oh, squirrel. And so I'm praying out loud, and what I thought was just going to be this prayer of God, fix it, fix me so that I can do a good thing during second service, all of a sudden turned into confession, and I wasn't expecting that. And so I said something that I just wanted to say, God, I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry with the ways that I'm not connected to you. And then it turned into another and another and another and another. And so the more that I started to say these things of going, God, I know that what I'm up to or what I'm not up to just showcases some of the ways where I just want my connection with you to be more. And what happened is about 3/4 of the way around, I got an opportunity to do something about the thing that I was praying for. And I almost missed it because it was like, I got to get there. They're probably almost in announcements by now. And then I stopped and I was like, time out. God's given me a chance to literally do the thing that I was just praying about. And there was something that happened in that moment of that connection point. And it was like, God, I feel like I want my connection to be more with you than it is right now. I feel like that there's a way that I want to get closer to you because I know that when I get closer to you, there's something that you're going to give me. And I got to do something about it. And I walk in, and the first person that I found was Carly, and she was in the debrief, and so she was praying over me in the debrief that God would help and all that. And I immediately found her, and I was like, let me tell you what just happened. And so I want you to know that this is very real time for me. This is literally a few minutes ago. And as we look in John 15, what we see is we see Jesus having a conversation in some of the literal last hours that he has with his closest followers before he is going to be put on trial, before he is going to be killed, shamed, and all these things. And he's wrapping up a giant conversation that he's basically been having for over 3 years with these people. And we get to some of his last words in chapter 15, and this is the metaphor that he begins to use. I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You're the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can't do anything. If you do not remain in me, you're like a branch that's thrown away, that withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into a fire and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, whatever you wish, whatever you ask, it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. Now, to frame out some of this language, and I want you to recognize this is a metaphor that Jesus is using where he is talking about this idea of a vine, a grapevine, a vineyard. And he's using these words, remain and fruit. And so if you're newer to church, or if you're just checking this out or trying to figure out what the Bible is even all about, this idea of remain is literally what I was just talking about, this idea of being connected to. He's basically saying, connect yourself to me. And as you do that, I'm going to connect myself to you. And there's going to be this way where when you do that, something else is going to happen. And this fruit that he's talking about, it's all of these things that come away from this connected relationship that we get to have with Jesus. And he says, as you are connected with me and as I'm connected with you, there's going to be stuff happen that you can't dream up. There's going to be things happen that are bigger than your imagination. You're actually, like Galen talks about, going to be able to go through difficult situations and somehow still be okay. Not okay, like it's like nothing happened and all of that stuff, but literally okay in the sense of there is a bigger thing that I recognize that's happening, and it's going to help me remain. Because of these things, it's actually going to pull me even closer. My connection with Jesus can actually be greater in times of hardship. This has been the story of so many of us in this room. This has been the story of so many followers of Jesus for 2 millennia. Jesus uses this metaphor of a vine and a vineyard because it's something that's been used literally for centuries to put on display God's people. There's actually a song in Isaiah called The Song of the Vineyard. And it's actually a song that starts out with a green and lush space that goes into utter destruction. And then Jeremiah actually picks up on this theme as well. And then also in the temple where the Jewish people would go to worship, there was a giant, ornate, golden grapevine across the entrance that was there to showcase what God was like, what connectedness with God would be like. It would be like this bounty, this harvest. Even in the revolt that happened with the Jewish people when they rose up against the Roman Empire in the 60s, they actually minted their own coin to kind of like go, we're going to have our own currency, we're going to take control of everything that's going on. And the stamp on their currency that they minted was a grapevine. And so this idea of a vine and a branch would have been something not just they knew about because they were in kind of a farming community and they understood what vineyards were. It was actually pointing back to a centuries-old understanding of what it meant to be God's people that he now pulls forward when he says, I am the true vine. There are a lot of vines that you can connect yourself to. There's a lot of stuff around here that's going on in Jerusalem. There's a lot of stuff going on around here in the Galilee and all of these surrounding areas. There are plenty of places where you can connect yourself to, but I'm the true vine. We tend to think of truth being the right answer, that it's a statement of fact, but there's actually a couple of things going on here with this word. One is, yes, that it's true, that it's right, but another way that this can be translated is I'm dependable. Jesus looks at his followers after he's been saying all kinds of wild things to them, and he's getting ready to say some more. And he says, I'm dependable. When you connect yourself to me, you can know that I'm going to keep my word. All the stuff that I've said, all the stuff that I'm getting ready to say, it's true. I'm the true vine. You can depend on all of my words. You can depend on what it means to be connected to me. And then he goes into this idea of remaining, this idea of being connected. And there's two ways that this verb is actually used in verse 4. So if you look in verse 4, it's remain, remain, bear fruit, remain. In the very first instance that we see remain, it's this idea of a command. Jesus is basically going, hey, remain. He's like, do it. Be connected. Stay close. I know what's best for you. I'm dependable. Remain. And then the other two places is it's not just this idea of a command, but it's more this idea of a continuous, conscious choice. And so now all of a sudden, the onus is not simply in just do it, but it's keep doing it. And it's also do it on purpose. There's a conscious reality where there is a way where Jesus is going to get to in a second of going, your job is to stay connected to me. My job is to do literally everything else. But what I need you to do is I need you to connect yourself. But it's not just a one-time deal, it's a continual connection. And it's not just a continual connection that you're just kind of on autopilot. Think about it. Stay connected. Remain in me, and I'm actually going to remain in you. So there's a way that remaining would have also been understood in the time. And it has to do with grapevines. So I have a bunch. We're going to talk about them in just a second. So we've got these guys. And then we have these guys right here that were cut a few days ago. All of these were by Matt Daniels. So thanks, Matt, for the object lesson. They're out of his backyard. He has really good grapes. And these he cut this morning. And so this idea of staying connected, this idea of remaining, would have been understood in some of these maybe larger contexts that we see on the bigger scale, but they also would have understood it when he's talking about vine and branch and staying connected and all this. They would have understood it through this concept called grafting. Now, grafting was basically a way to cut a branch that was on a particular vine branch, and you cut it, and then you actually place it into a different root system, a different branch. So you have kind of like the big branch, and then everything comes off of it. And what you can do is you can go get something from a different vineyard or from a different part of your own vineyard, and you can actually splice it in. And so let's look at what that looks like. So the first thing that you do is you cut the branch. But if you look down at the bottom, if you can see this, it's just kind of like, it's just rough-edged, and it's not all that easy to do much with. And so then what you have is you have the farmer who takes a knife and cuts it in very specific ways to make it a very sharp point. Right there. So he cuts it on either side, and it makes this really nice, tight V. So that's step one from the branch. But then you have the other piece of it. You have the actual vine, okay? And again, in our metaphor, this is going to be us, and then this right here, the actual vine, is going to be Jesus, okay? That's the metaphor that he's using. And so you split the vine down the middle. And then what you do is you take the branch, and you actually place it inside the vine. If you can see it down there by the gardener's thumb right there. And so inside the split is where this V goes into to be settled and to rest really nice and tight if the farmer is making really good cuts. And then the last piece is to wrap it up, to help it stay connected, to help it remain. Do we have one more? I think we have one more of or is that it? Is that all? We'll get to that in just a second. So can you go back to that last picture? Yeah. So this idea right here, you have the branch that's now inside the vine. And then you have this idea of wrapping. Now, what's really beautiful about the top piece, this branch, is that anytime any of us come into the faith community of God, we get grafted in some version of this right here. Now, one of the things that happens whenever you bring a different branch in is you will never get the same grape that you just got. You actually created a new kind of wine every time. And so if you're grabbing stuff from all of these different vineyards and you're bringing them back to this one root system, every time that happens, it changes the product. And I love the idea that every time any one of us come into the family of God, every time anyone in the world says, I want to start following Jesus, I want to be a part of his faith community, in the global sense and in a local sense, the church changes. We get better. There's a different expression of us because of who you are, your uniqueness that brings not just your own self, but it changes all of us. It's beautiful. And so this right here gets to be maybe you in the past, or maybe you in the future, or maybe you right now, where you get grafted in to the vine of Jesus, and then you get held together by this tape in such a way so that you will remain. So that you'll be connected. And not just so that you'll be connected, but that you can stay connected. Because you're dead without the vine. So I want to play a game on a continuum here. I want to do mostly dead to least dead. Okay? Does anybody remember? He's only mostly dead. Huh? Anybody? Okay, thanks. I also thought about, I don't know if I have time for I just took my time that I was going to say it. Any Monty Python fans out there? Bring out your dead. And he's like, I'm not dead yet. You will be. Sorry. All right, so mostly dead to least dead to less dead to alive. Or is this dead as well? As soon as it's been cut from the root system, as soon as it's been cut from the source of life, these two things are exactly the same. It's dead. One of my favorite comedians, he has this bit about flowers when you give flowers to people, and he's like, I'm super confused that you give dead things to people you love. And he's like, hey, I love you so much, here's some dead things. Now just watch them die. And he says, I feel like that what we need to do is we need to turn giving flowers into a threat with our enemies. Hey, you see these dead things? You're next. It's dead. Are any of us going to put this in a bouquet? Well, I mean, I guess like you might want to if you're bougie, but we're not going to take this right here and go, no, this is dead, but this is alive. Because this looks really different. And I think that there's a lot of times when we feel like that because we're in water, okay? And help, I'm going to expand the metaphor a little bit. Because we're doing good stuff, that we're alive. Okay? But I'm in church, like I'm coming to church, and so there's water that's surrounding me, and it's giving me nourishment. Even if it's just for a little while, it's still doing the thing. And then there's that like white powder stuff that you put in the flowers to like make them last longer. And so who knows what that is, right? It's like I did some good stuff today. Or I read my Bible a little bit. I'm interested in like looking really good, but I'm not necessarily interested in being connected. I'm not necessarily interested in being inside the vine. What Jesus says in this passage is that all of these are equally dead. We just get duped into thinking that somehow this is still alive. We get duped into thinking in the end of days when we all stand before Jesus, and there's going to be a group of people that said, I looked really pretty when I lived on earth. I kept myself in water. I poured the powder stuff in there so that I could do a thing. I smelled really good. And Jesus is going to look so confused. And he's going to say, but you were never connected to me. And so he says, remain. If you want to live, remain. Because here's what's amazing. Inside this vine and branch relationship that we have where this grafting is taking place, when the farmer winds it up really tight and keeps it really close together, the only job of the branch is to be still. The only job of a follower of Jesus is to get as close as we possibly can to Jesus and let him give us life. Let him do the work. Like literally, there are farmers that talk about this stuff, and they say that literally, when we do this grafting, that life is pressed into this branch. And Jesus says, remain in me, stay connected to me. When I graft you in, the closer that you can get, the tighter that you can hold on, even in the midst of a wind, even in the midst of a storm, even in the midst of a drought. If you will stay connected to me, I have roots that go so deep. My nourishment will get you through a difficult season. And in fact, some of the best wine is actually made during droughts. Because the grapes are hard pressed, and so they have to really gut it out. And you get a really sweet grape that happens in those seasons where there's little water because they're so connected to the depth of the vine, the depth of Jesus, the vastness of Jesus, the glory of God is what we get to be connected to. Stay connected to me. And I'm going to stay connected to you. Remember, I'm dependable. I'm dependable. And if you stay connected to me, I promise you that I will stay connected to you and I will give you sustenance. I will give you life. I will give you grace to actually stay connected to me, even in the hard times. Remember, there's two things right here. Get connected, stay connected. Make the conscious, continual choice to squeeze onto me as tightly as possible. That's all you got to do. I'll do the rest. So that's all great, but how? Well, there's this practice that has been happening for a couple of millennia with our followers and with followers of Jesus, our brothers and sisters from 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago. It's called the spiritual practices. We talked about one of them as we're getting ready to go into Easter, this idea of a fast. This idea of taking away maybe a food item or taking away social media or taking away whatever it would be to be able to go, I'm going to set aside some of the typical things that I do so that I can have the opportunity to get more connected with you. And so for centuries, for millennia, followers of Jesus have been trying to figure out ways to stay connected. And so for those of you who've been around church or whatever, maybe you know some of these, but spiritual practices can feel really weird. It's like, are we humming a lot? What are we doing? But some of the things are actually in our book from the very first year that we started Oak House. The very first thing that we said when we started Oak House was we have 5 things that we feel like are most important to be a part of Oak House and what we believe to be following Jesus. And what we said was the first thing was be connected to the vine. Be connected to Jesus, and he is going to connect himself to you. You who realize that you're dead in whatever state that you are, get connected, and then you will receive life. And so this whole first year, what we spent time on was going, hey, as something to put out there as like a stretch goal that none of us are really probably ever going to reach, let's spend an hour a day with Jesus. Does that feel daunting? Yes. I don't know that anyone has done it every day in the 4.5 years that we've been doing this. But it's one of those things of going, I believe what Jesus said. I believe that he's dependable and that the closer that I can get, the more connected that I can be, the more connected that he will be with me. And I'll get to see flourishing in my life in ways that I could not do on my own. And so these spiritual practices include just reading the Bible, praying, going on a prayer walk and talking out loud, and then all of a sudden God will go, okay, and then you get to do something about it. Silence, which is really hard in a really loud world. Generosity. And so there's been people who have written specifically about the spiritual practices and have really helped me understand that, again, the whole remaining piece can all of a sudden feel like we need to gut something out or effort something. But what the spiritual practices get to do is they help us remember that the spiritual practices, praying, reading your Bible, doing all those things, that's not the destination. We can use those as check boxes going, did it, did it, did it, did it, did it. But what the spiritual practices and what these writers have helped me understand is that, no. These are the things that help you remain. Because remaining is the goal. Get next to Jesus. Be connected. Dallas Willard writes this: remaining in Jesus is a conscious, continuous, look at this, apprenticeship, moving beyond mere belief to active inward transformation. Richard Foster writes, by themselves, the spiritual disciplines or the spiritual practices can do nothing. They can only get us to a place where something can be done. Henry Nouwen writes, it is precisely in times of spiritual dryness that we must hold on to our spiritual discipline so that we can grow into new intimacy with God. And then finally, Elizabeth Elliot wrote, we cannot give our hearts to God and keep our bodies far from him. If you remain in me, my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. This is my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So if Jesus says, stay connected to me, I'm going to stay connected to you. And we talked about ways to stay connected and to get in proximity where we can remain, and that Jesus is going to do his thing. What does Jesus doing his thing mean? It means this idea of bearing fruit. So what is bearing fruit? Well, I think a lot of times, at least for me, and I would say maybe for some of you, fruit, this idea of what comes out of us when we follow Jesus, somehow gets really messy with this idea of achievement. Because we're all good at stuff, right? And even when we're not connected to the vine, we can still look really good. We can still smell really good. There's a lot of good stuff that can happen. And this is not bad. Like, that's the other thing, too, is like, nobody would go, ugh, you're dead. And so there's this idea between achievement and fruit starts to kind of get wonky. And so Ronald Reiser actually wrote this: achievement is not the same thing as fruitfulness. Our achievements are things that we have accomplished. Our fruitfulness is the positive, long-term effect these achievements have on who? Others. Yeah. Achievement doesn't automatically mean fruitfulness. Achievement helps us stand out. Fruitfulness brings blessings into other people's lives. John Tyson recently wrote on this idea specifically of achievement and fruitfulness, and he's the one who cites Roller right here. And he was trying to synthesize his thoughts specific to, okay, if there's a difference between achievement and fruitfulness, what would a life of fruitfulness actually look like? And so here's some things that he wrote as far as the synthesis of markers of a life of fruitfulness. It produces life in other people, joy, peace, growth, healing, not just admiration. It's relational at its core. It blesses the community rather than elevating the individual. It is often unseen and difficult to quantify. It flows out of character, especially graciousness, generosity, and kindness. It reduces envy and restlessness in others. It invites us to abide, there's that word, to connect, to remain, and not to compare. That was one of the things that I actually confessed is I constantly compare myself to other pastors. It's rooted in surrender, not in control. It comes from a life yielded rather than managing outcomes. It endures beyond the moment and has a long horizon and lingering impact. It's not dependent on recognition. It can exist fully without attention or applause. It is remembered in terms of who you were, not just what you did. It aligns with love as a way of being, not love as an occasional act. It becomes clearer with time, often most visible after we die. There's a passage of Scripture that I immediately thought about when I read these things. And maybe you're thinking about it too. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Stay connected to me. And as I push life into your lifeless body apart from me, the stuff that's going to come out looks like that. Can you imagine if that was the banqueting table that people who aren't followers of Jesus got? How sour are the grapes that Christians are sometimes producing? This past Tuesday night at high school group, we celebrated St. Patrick with green everything. We did Lucky Charms cereal, and we dyed the milk green. And so we were living it up in all the ways. And so some of the girls, they didn't want just Lucky Charms, and so they said, "Can you get guacamole?" And I was like, "That doesn't feel like, that feels more like Cinco de Mayo, but whatever." And then they said, "What's another green food?" And then every one of them were like, "Oh my gosh, cotton candy grapes." I heard an amen back here. And so all of a sudden, can we just get on board with the idea? And for those of you who are in the room who aren't followers of Jesus, you may be like, "Are you serious?" Yes. Can we get on board with the idea that if people were to look around and go, "Those people are followers of Jesus," how do you know? Because they love each other. Because they're peaceful, they're filled with joy, they have hard things, and there's all this stuff going on, but somehow they say that they're connected to something that's way bigger than their circumstance. They're kind. They're just good people. They're faithful. And I've at least heard some of them say that one of the reasons why they're faithful is because Jesus promised that he was going to be faithful to them. Can you imagine what it would look like if we were so connected as individuals and we were so connected as a community to this one central vine, as we have all been grafted in at some point here, to make this incredible varietal that comes out that has the expression uniquely of every one of us, but this collective expression of grapes that tastes like cotton candy. Everyone would be eating those things. Everyone would go, "Whatever you're connected to, I want it." What are you connected to? How are you connected to Jesus or whatever it is that you're talking about right now? Well, these ways. That sounds like a bunch of rules. No. It's actually the way that I get next to him and I get still. That's my job. So then in chapter 17, Jesus goes on to kind of bring this full circle and explain why it is that this stuff matters. Stay connected to me and I will stay connected to you, and there's going to be fruit. There's all of these things that we've been talking about that are going to come out of your life. And as those things come out of your life, people will know that you're my followers. And people will be super interested. They'll be curious. They'll ask great questions. You'll have some skeptics that come in, and instead of just pushing them to the side, you'll welcome them in to go, "Yeah, let's talk about that." You're actually able to have someone come into a group or to meet with you like at lunch during your work hour and say, I'm so frustrated with you. I hate you. You are my ultimate enemy. And we get to respond with something so radically different because of our connectedness with Jesus. And Jesus says, if you're doing that, people will pay attention. They may never agree with you, but they're going to have an understanding of what I'm actually like. So stay connected to me. For the sake of yourself. Because that's the thing is like we get life in this whole situation. But it's also for this community right here. We get to be this incredible expression of what Jesus is like through all of our pieces coming together. And then we get to do this right here to put on display for Mission Viejo, for Orange County, for California, for the ends of the earth, what it's like for a group of people to stay connected to Jesus. And you guys smash this. You do it so well. And so I'm going to ask the band to come up. And what I want to do is I want to just take the next bit of time that we have, and I want you to consider where you are on this continuum. Like, do you feel like you're all the way dead, that you're completely dried up, that if we put a flame to you right now, you would just turn into dust? You feel like you've been laying around a while, and you're definitely wilted, and if anybody saw you, they'd be like, oh, yeah, that person, yep, they're, Or maybe you're a little fresher. Maybe it's like, I had a really difficult month. I had a really difficult week. Last night was horrible. Maybe you're working really hard. Maybe you're looking great. But there's also this piece of you that goes, yeah, but there's a way that I want to be more connected. There's a way where I don't want this to simply be outward. I want it to look like this because of what's going on in here. I want it to look like this because of my connection and the fact that Jesus is allowing life to be put into me. And so let's just have a conversation right now with the Lord, you individually. There's going to be a song that is like on point for everything that we've been talking about that Adriana's going to sing. And if you just want to read the words, that's what I did for service because I didn't know the song. It was beautiful. It really helped articulate what we've been talking about in a really beautiful way. And so maybe that's what you get to do is you just get to read the words and you just go, yeah, God, that. He loves that stuff. Or maybe you want to come to him because of just some deep pain where you really feel disconnected and you're actually trying to fight for connection and it just doesn't feel like it's working. We want to pray for that too. That's why we do this together. Or if you feel vibrant, if you feel full of life, then get to have that conversation with God too and just to go, thank you. And we do all of these things, not just for ourselves, and not just for ourselves, but for people who are paying attention, people who are looking, people who aren't paying attention. So God, thank you for staying connected to us when we connect to you. Thanks for wanting that for us. I pray that this time would just be an amazing time of conversation, whether it's out loud with words, whether it's internally, whether it's through singing or whatever the case would be. Pray that you were honored as our worship continues.